And on the same section, we're going to do two different pieces with this one. We're not just going to synthetic divide or long divide. However, that is one of the things that we need to do. Everything that you should be able to do today should be able to be synthetic divided. Okay, so the last parts that we just went over again, that's where you can do that. What you're going to be doing, the first part, it's going to say factor completely, just like you had the other day. The downfall to factoring completely, bless you, the downfall of factoring completely for this part is you can't use those factoring techniques that we did the other day. It's not going to work. Okay, so here's going to be the problems. They're going to look like this, where it says f of x equals x cubed minus 10x squared plus 19x plus 30, and then in the back of it, it gives you one of the pieces. Okay? So if we try to do this the way we did it the other day, where we're factoring completely, if we have four terms like this, we said grouping. But if you try to group that, in the front you could take an x squared out, but then you'd have x minus 10. In the back you couldn't take anything out, and you'd have 19x plus 30. Are they the same things? No, they're not. So how do you do this? So when it asks you to factor like this, and I'm giving you one of the factors, how many groups do you think it should have if the highest exponent's a 3? 3. It should have 3 groups. If the highest exponent's a 3, then it should have 3 groups. Yes, Jackson?
Why is it x minus 6? Shouldn't it be x equals 6?
We'll get to that in a second. Okay? So right now, when we're just factoring, x minus 6 is one of the answers. Now, in order to get started on this, we are going to synthetic divide just like we did 12 through 18 on the assignment we just turned in, or should have turned in. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set this piece equal to 0. So x minus 6 equals 0. So what do I get for x? X equals 6. What you've just found there is you found the number that goes in the backwards L. Okay, so 6 is going to go here. And now what number should go across on my synthetic division? 1, negative 10, 19, and 30. So when I do this one, now how do I synthetic divide again? Drop the first one. 1 times 6. What's negative 10 plus 6? Negative 4. What's 6 times negative 4? Negative 24 plus 19. Negative 5. And 6 times negative 5? Negative 30. And what's 30 minus 30? 0. Unlike most of the ones that you had for your assignment that you turned in today or should have turned in today, 0 never showed up, did it? It always had a remainder of some sort. Now, if it's giving you that x minus 6 is a factor or x equals 6 is a 0, guess what remainder we should always get for this stuff today? 0. You shouldn't have a remainder on this today. Okay?
That means
So now from here, if I take the highest exponent of 3 and I drop it by 1, where do I start? I start at x. Right. So that's 1x squared minus 4x minus 5. Now it's a squared situation. How do you square or how do you factor a quadratic? That goes back to stuff that you did in Algebra 1 and earlier for me this year. What times what gives me x squared? X times x. What times what gives me negative 5 but adds it to be negative 4? Negative 5, positive 1. Okay? If I multiply negative 5 times positive 1, I get negative 5, but when I add them together, I get negative 4. So how many groups do you have right there? 2. And you said that there should have been 3. Where's the third group? No, I gave you it right here in the problem. X minus 6 was the other one. And done. That's factored completely. These are the steps that you're going to have to do for the first half of your assignment today. You are going to set the back equal to 0, and you're going to run it through synthetic dividing. And then whatever's left over, you factor just that piece. Yes, Don?
So if it says like x plus 6 will be negative 6.
Yes. Ash?
So every time you synthetic divide, you will use x squared and x in the remainder.
Well, for this one, because we're starting with x cubed is the highest one, so you always drop it by 1, so it starts with x squared.
So if it starts with x to the 4th, you'll use x cubed.
Yes. It always drops it by 1 because you're dividing it by something linear. Okay? Let's do another one. So f of x equals x cubed plus 6x squared plus 5x minus 12, and then x plus 4 is the group that they give you. So if x plus 4 is the first group that they give you, what do you do first? So if I set this equal to 0 and I solve for x, I get x equals negative 4. What do I do with that negative 4? That's the number that goes in my backwards L. 1, 6, 5, negative 12. How did I get those numbers? Okay, good. All right, now what's the process? Drop the 1. When I multiply that, I get negative 4. When I add that, what do I get? 2. When I multiply it now, I get what? Negative 8. When I add that, I get negative 3. And when I multiply that, I get what? I get positive 12. And what should I get as the remainder? 0. If it is a true factor, I should get 0 for the remainder. If it's not, then they gave us bad info. Or we just did it wrong. So now from here, if it was x cubed, I drop it by 1. So I start with x squared. So that's 1x squared plus 2x minus 3. What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me negative 3 but adds up to be 2? Try again. Nope. Because when I multiply those, that doesn't give me 3. It gives me 2. 3 and negative 1. When I multiply those, it gives me negative 3. But when I add them, it gives me positive 2. And what's the third group that it gave us at the beginning? And done. I have factored that completely. Is everybody okay with my steps that I need to solve the first half of your assignment? That's how you do the first half. Okay? The second half is almost identical. The only difference is now they're going to ask you to find the zeros. Now, zeros of a function are nothing more than where it crosses the x-axis on a graph. That's what a 0 is. Okay, it does some information later on for us, but for this particular thing, it's going to give you one of the zeros and you've got to find the other two. So it's going to give you something like this. F of x equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 21x minus 18, and then behind the thing says negative 3. Now one thing I want you to notice about the back group, it doesn't have x plus 3. It already tells you what number to put in. When it says negative 3, we're not going to solve that for 0 because there's no x there. It's already giving you one of the answers. How many answers should you have if the highest exponent is 3? 3. How many answers does it give you? 1. You need to find the other 2. So, negative 3 is going to go in my backwards L. And what number should I write going across? What number should I get as the remainder, do you think? 0. If I don't, either A, we multiplied or added wrong, or B, we got the wrong info. Okay? So if I drop the 1, what's negative 3 times 1? Negative 3. What's negative 3 minus 2? Negative 5. What's negative 5 times negative 3? 15 minus 21. Negative 6 times negative 3. Positive 18, which should give me 0. So now again, I start with x to the third. I drop it by 1. So now I'm down to 1x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. How do you solve a quadratic? You can factor it, or what? Quadratic formula was the other way that you guys really enjoyed doing them. Okay? So for this one, it does factor. The majority of them will factor for you, but there's that odd chance that they don't. So if it does factor, what times what gives me x squared? X and x. What times what gives me negative 6, but adds up to be negative 5? Negative 6 and positive 1. Because when I multiply them, I get negative 6, but when I add them, I should get negative 5. What do I do with each group now? Set them each equal to 0, so x minus 6 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and what do I get? X equals 6, x equals negative 1, and x equals negative 3 from the initial. So how many answers did I get? 3. How many should you get if the highest exponent's 3? 3. Okay? What do you think of this? All right. Let me give you one more, just because. Yeah, I got f of x equals 5x to the third minus x squared minus 18x plus 8. And the 0 that I'm giving you is negative 2. So what number goes in my backwards L? Negative 2. What numbers go across? Drop the 5. 5 times negative 2. Negative 1 minus 10. Negative 11. Times negative 2. 22 minus 18. 4 times negative 2. So now this should be 5x squared minus 11x plus 4 equals 0. If I try to factor that, what times what gives me 5? 1 and 5. What times what gives me 4? 2 and 2? 1 and 4? No matter how hard I try, I'm never going to make negative 11 in the middle. So if it doesn't factor, what do you have to do? You have to use the quadratic formula, which I know it's been a while since you've seen it. It's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So what number is in my b position? Negative 11. What number is in your a position?
5.
What number is in your c position? 4. Now remember, when you simplify this, 2 negatives on the outside first. What's minus a negative 11? Positive 11. Here's the other part that we had a trouble with. What's negative 11 squared? 121. Not negative 121. It's always positive, because when you square a positive or square a negative, you should get a positive answer. Now what's negative 4 times 5 times 4? Negative 80. And on the bottom, what's 2 times 5? 10. What's 121 minus 80? 41. When we did the quadratic formula, once you got it to this step, then you tried to simplify the root 41. The square root of 41, does it break down? Does 2 go into 41? No. Does 3? How about 5? 7? 11? 13? 17? 19? 23? 29? 31? 37? 41?
Yeah.
Yeah. But 41's prime, so does it reduce any? No. So this right here, along with the -2 that I gave you to begin with, are my answers for this problem. Now, how many answers do I have there? I have 3. The 3 answers are 11 plus the square root of 41 divided by 10. And then there's 11 minus the square root of 41 divided by 10. And then the -2. I think that might be the only one where you have to use the quadratic formula. However, if you want to, could you use the quadratic formula for all those parts? Yes, you can. What do you think? So the first thing you do is you synthetic divide, and then you take the leftover stuff, the squared piece, and either factor it, or complete the square on it, or quadratic formula it to find any other zeros. In the first half of the assignment, once you synthetic divide, then you just factor the pieces that you have left. Okay? So on page 366, 22 to 34, evens.